Hello everyone, it's Brett here, Lionheart84, and I'm looking today, this is following on from a video that Peter did. I'm looking at my two young Jujubes that came from Jurassic plants. I did have another one previously which had died, but I thought I'd try again. And these are apparently, so they said, grown from tissue cultures, so they are meant to be the actual variety that is named on the label. In this case they're called, the variety is Dong, which I think is also known as Dongzao. I've had these for a long time. When I say a long time, they weren't bought this winter, they were bought at least the winter before, and I would say they probably only grew about 3 or 4 inches last summer. And then, as is common with young jujubes, these very thin wispy stems tend to drop off in winter. They have two types of growth, a primary growth and a secondary growth. And the primary growth tends to be the main stem, which will normally thicken up and survive the winter, and then you get a lot of these little secondary growths that quite often stay very stem and thin and wispy, and would be flowering shoots if the plant was big enough to flower, and they tend to turn yellow and simply fall off in winter. So the plants do actually, in the initial years, die back quite a lot in winter, not from the cold, it's just the way they seem to grow. Now of course the advantage of this being a stem culture plant is it won't matter how low down the stems come. So if it grows, as this one's got a little shoot appearing down here, if these happen to grow as more of a bush, that's fine, because they should all the shoots will be the named variety, rather than with a grafted one where any low shoots or suckers that come up would obviously be a rootstock. So it won't even matter if these plants happen to sucker at some stage, the suckers that come up will be the same variety, Dong or Dongzao. Now they've actually started off very well this spring, because what I found was I had them in the pot was fairly, they came in tiny little, I think 3-inch pots, and I transferred them to about 5-inch pots, but I found the plants didn't do anything last year at all. I did actually leave them outside this winter. The previous winter I left them in the greenhouse to try and give them a bit more shelter, but it didn't seem to make much difference. But this winter I left them outside, and I've had no real dieback problems. You do have to watch with these young jujube, the young shoots can be decimated by snails and slugs, but actually these ones seem to have escaped this year. Excuse me. And I repotted them a couple of weeks ago, which is why I was doing the video to show Peter. I repotted them a couple of weeks ago in these much larger size pots. They're probably about, I think they're about maybe 8 or 9 litres, so roughly, yeah, getting on for 2 gallons. And since I've repotted them, and I've used quite a heavy mix of soil, this is kind of a mix of topsoil, some John Innes, some perlite, some sand, because I felt they weren't doing very well in the mixes that had a lot of bark in. But actually, since I've repotted them, you can probably see these shoots have put on about probably 4 or 5 inches growth this year. You can see there that one where it's branched out, yeah, it's put on a good 4 or 5 inches growth, and we're only obviously in at the end of the first week of June, so I'm very pleased. They seem to have really responded well to going into these larger pots, and obviously I'm not going to have to disturb the roots now for a couple of years. These should be okay in these pots for some time, so I'm going to focus on getting them larger this year in the hope that they don't suffer too much dieback. And I wouldn't be surprised if they grow well enough if we didn't see flowers on these in 2 or 3 years time, which will be a suitable cross pollinator for my 2 Li and Lang trees, and it would be nice to have a third one. I don't know anything about Dong in terms of what the fruit is like. I guess I should research that online, but you can obviously have a look at that. You can look that up yourself if you're interested. But as far as I know, they're still offering this variety at Jurassic, and I believe they may well have Li and Lang. They've certainly got one of them, or did have them. They are very, very small plants. You're going to need a lot of patience looking after them to get them up to a size where they'll fruit, and the first couple of years they do keep dying back, so it's tricky. But as I said, I'm hoping that getting these into these larger pots with a sort of a fairly heavy soil, which will keep them moist, I'm hoping that they'll obviously perform very well, and we'll see what happens. But I will give you updates over the summer. I'll just stand them among my other potted plants. I haven't got them on the deck. I'll put them somewhere just marginally shady, because young plants like this, I don't want them to burn. So we'll see what happens, but I thought that would interest you, Peter, and probably Louise, because you've been, I know, had a go at going these young jujubes, and they can be very challenging. But so far these two aren't looking too bad, and they've responded well to going into larger pots, so fingers crossed that we get a decent amount of growth on them this year, and it's the size growth that doesn't die back straight away. Thanks for watching the video. Please give me a thumbs up, share the video, subscribe to my channel, and remember to click on the bell if you do want to know when new videos come out. I'll see you all soon. Brett out for now.